Very happy to see you guys. Quebec was fantastic. Actually, you guys weren't scheduled for that festival. You guys were last minute, last few days that Michelle brought you in, and it was a huge surprise, because we all knew the albums, especially the second one. I wasn't aware that much about the first one, but seeing you guys live was just awesome. So tell me more about you guys. How did you guys meet? Because you seem to have come from all different bands in the Seattle region. So we'll start with John then.
Oh, hello. Thank you for having us here. I don't know. I guess maybe I'm the oddity. So Michael and I, how did this happen? So Michael's band, Michael was looking for a bass player and a keyboard player. And there was an ad, and a bass player I knew. I'm like, or maybe just looking for a bass player. That's what it was. And I'm like, a bass player I knew. I'm like, hey, you should try this band out. They sound pretty cool. And that didn't come to anything. But I think maybe I should let Michael and Dave tell the other side of the story. But I think they're the instigators of Moonletters. And then Michael remembered me at that time. Does that sound about right?
Who
Michael?
started it? Was it Dave? Was it Michael?
I think it was both of us at the same time.
Yeah.
We were both had been playing in lots of different bands and maybe had other bands going, but met via a classified ad where I was looking for a drummer actually, and Michael responded, and oftentimes you get somebody who replies to your ad and it's like not at all what you're looking for, and the most polite thing you can do is just not even reply at all. But I got the email from this guy, so I checked it out and I was like, wow, he has a beautiful voice and writes really interesting stuff. So became a complete mind shift of what it would be like to do this kind of a project, which I don't think we knew that it would be Moonletters, but in terms of just wanting to work with this new person. And so then he knew Mike Murphy and John, and I knew Kelly, the drummer. So we
All joined
brought
in.
it all together.
So Michael, on your part, you were the drummer, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've always wanted to be a drummer, so it's probably just hoping I'd just get wrangled in as a drummer.
Sounds sad. You would have
What's
been a
that?
great drummer, I'm sure.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I try to play, but yeah, I think I just remember I remember meeting John through a friend. I forget, kind of what the timeline was. I met our bass player Mike Murphy very shortly after he moved to Seattle from, I forget if it was from Maryland or where he lived right before Seattle, but so Mike showed up and I was looking for somebody that wanted to play a lot of like complex chord changes on the bass, like interesting songs. And Mike sent me a link to his SoundCloud, and I swear he was playing like some sort of Bach piece on the bass. And I was like, this is exactly who I want to play with, and
So you're talking about complex stuff. So, I mean, your music is amazing and very complex. At the same time, it's so melodic. It's so easy to listen to that kind of music. You've got that melodic part and very complex part, and they all fit perfectly together. Sometimes we hear some bands and you hear, okay, that guy is probably the best musician of all the guys in the band, but you guys are a perfect mix. The songwriting, the voices, rhythm section, bass, that fretless bass is amazing. You should tell that guy he's a great musician.
Mhm.
Drumming is fantastic. Guitar player, where do you come from? It's you remind me of, it's strange, it's from the 70s, but still is. Not the sound, but the way you come from, you sound like Gary Green from Gentle Giant.
Mm.
I'll explain that. In the sense that it's more, it seems you come from a rock or blues type of band. You've got that very raunchy style and very eclectic, all those different sounds, and it fits and blends right in perfectly. I love your guitar playing.
Oh, thank you so much.
And you, John, is very different. I would compare you to Richard Barbieri from Porcupine Tree, or from Japan, is band from the 80s, as in the sense that you seem like more of a, I would say, a magician with all those wizardry kind of strange sounds. You're not that type of, you don't do solos like Keith Emerson or Wick Wakeman or Jordan Rudess. It's more that type of surrounding the whole thing and blending that music all in. It's, you guys are fantastic. I wasn't, when I first heard the album, I wanted to make a review, but one of my buddies was faster than me. Because I really liked the sound. And the first time I heard it, I heard things like, hey, this sounds like a bit of Zappa, a bit of this and this and this. I was all confused. But the second time I listened to it, I said, wow, these guys are amazing. I've got to, I couldn't make the review, but told all my buddies, you guys you've got to buy that album. They're just fantastic. And when I learned there was a huge prog, well, huge, I can't say, but there's a prog kind of, how do you call it, a prog scene in Seattle, I was really surprised, because when you think of Seattle, you think of the 80s and 90s, eh? So tell me more about that prog scene in Seattle. Anybody?
Well, before I answer that, can I just speak to one thing that you had said just a minute ago?
Sure.
You mentioned the sort of complexity, but I don't know if you use the word accessibility, but having like a through line of melody or something. And maybe this will connect with the scene in Seattle, but in the early 2000s, I played in a lot of bands that we were just trying to be super weird, right? Like all the time. So if anything we played sounded like anything, that sounds a little too much like Black Sabbath, or that sounds a little too much like anything, then we would purposely make it weirder, and like you can't play any normal chords, or everything has to be dissonant and atonal and all this stuff. And I think at a certain point, we got so far in that direction where it became almost limiting, right? And there was a lot of bands in Seattle that were doing this kind of stuff, like into mixing free music, like free jazz, with rock and noise, a lot of drone and experimental kind of things, where it's almost more of performance art.
Yep.
At a certain point. And so I think that Seattle has a really, really thriving, just like expressive arts and creativity underground. And so maybe that kind of art scene, more so than what you would think of as a traditional prog rock scene. I know in the mid 2000s in San Francisco, there was a ton of bands that were doing this psychedelic revival kind of music, like Comets on Fire and those kinds of bands. And that felt more like a scene maybe than what Seattle has ever had. But I think Seattle just has people who are really open-minded. And so a lot of times you play on a bill and the first person who plays might be a solo artist doing experimental noise. Then the second band might be free music, and then the third band would play through composed, highly complex kind of stuff. And so you see a lot of bills like that, I think.
Yeah, well, I think that prog rock is a bit limitless in terms of, it's actually a term that we kind of build around with, especially the radio from Quebec that I'm with Profil Prog. But we all know that it's more complex than that. It's more open-minded. Art rock should suit better than prog rock, I think. Prog rock, we all know it's from the 70s. It started 69, 68 and ended in late 70s. This is part of something that's from the past. We all know that. But you guys, even though you guys have that similarities from the 70s sound, even some 60s sound, you guys have your own sound. We can't put you in a genre like prog rock. It's very tough to say that, but still, our followers love prog, and for them, prog is Moonletters, and it's also all kinds of different bands. So this is the way we think about it. So let's talk about your albums. First album, as I was a bit surprised because I've asked Michael about the lyrics, and lyrically it's very kind of a Celtic thing going on, eh? Am I wrong, or?
No, that's right.
So what's the story behind the first album? It seems all connected. All the songs seem connected, eh? One to another.
Right. In a story sort of format.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all connected from beginning to end. So are you familiar with kind of like a Selkie mythology?
A bit, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And it's that kind of mythology plays out in a lot of cultures where there's like some sort of being that can transform into human shape and then back again. And so I was always really fascinated by I guess particularly the Selkies, because they were kind of like one of the weirdest things to turn into a human and then back again. I feel like there's other mythologies that are more popular, like I don't know if it's like a mermaid or a swan turns, and it's like you can imagine this beautiful person turning into a swan, but I always thought it was weird that they would turn into a seal. There's just something like a little darker about it, so that's I guess what appealed to me.
Does that come from you, or the band is more into that type of stuff also? Like lyrically, is it you only that writes the lyrics, or is it a band thing?
I think for the most part, I've done all the lyric writing. There's one song on the new album that John mostly wrote the lyrics to.
Okay.
So that was a good first lyric collaboration.
So I'll ask John and Dave. We all remember Genesis saying in different interviews that they just didn't know what Peter Gabriel was writing about. So is it that kind of stuff that Michael writes stuff and you guys don't understand at all?
Oh,
It was
no.
funny. It's funny. There's one part in one of the songs on the new album, and the whole band had been singing along the wrong words the whole time.
But they sounded good.
But it sounded good, so we still sing the wrong words there.
Yeah. It's sort of like people singing the wrong words to Creedence Clearwater Revival music or something, but
yeah,
they're in
but
the
it sounded great and you kept it.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a melody guy, and lyrics don't always stick with me. There's like tons of songs I don't even know. Some of the even ones I've written, I kind of forget. So that's not my strong suit. And if Michael is singing something and it sounds great, I may not even notice he might be singing about a bread box, although I don't think you do you? But yeah, I think we're kind of more in the line where we let Michael he has a very long leash.
Yeah, and I love the lyrics. Don't make me wrong, Michael. I love the lyrics.
Oh, they're great. I mean, when you read them on paper, they're actually very good too.
And they sound great. That's the whole thing, eh? They just
Mhm.
sound great. Uh, I know that it's very tough for us because we actually listen to a lot of English lyrics, but we speak French. So
Mhm.
a lot of guys say, "Hey, what are they saying? What's the meaning of all these songs?" Just it fits all together. That's how we see it. So it's probably different from a British guy or a guy from New Zealand or a UK guy. It's different. It's their language. They can hear it. For us, it's more the music that is the first part that we kind of listen and say, "Wow, this band is great." So, what is he saying about? So, yeah, first album was that. Second album was, for my part, there's no song that is weak on the second album. Not that I'm saying the first one had, but it's more unified for my part. I think the whole album six and the way the songs one after the other, I don't know if it was chosen like that, but they blend perfectly. My favorite, we all have favorites, eh? Fate of the Alicorn is something that just blew my mind. Uh, and it was funny because I was with my grandson and I was actually listening to the second album, and he said, well, in French, he said that music is kind of weird, eh? I said, yeah. Vavu is Portuguese. Grandpa in Portuguese is Vavu, and he always calls me Vavu. And he says, Vavu, this is strange music. Eh? You always listen to strange music. Said this band is really good. You got to listen to that. And Fate of the Alicorn. When I told him about the unicorn, like that winged unicorn, he just saw, wow, this is my music. So what I meant with the album is, even though all the songs are great, what I like is all the musicianship of each of you guys. Is where do you guys come from? Seattle is such a place I just didn't know you guys before, and musically, you guys, I think I don't know if the third album you started composing stuff because you're still doing shows. I think you had a show yesterday. So are you guys already thinking about a third album? Is there any projects in mind for you guys?
We're thinking about it. There's songs that are demoed that we have around. We're playing around with maybe a slightly different approach to this album, the third one too. The second album was much more collaborative because the first album, some stuff was already written as we were still finding band members. While everyone, for the most part, writes their own parts and contributes, the songs were more fleshed out before everybody got their hands on them. Where the second album, everything really changed a lot. More people wrote from the get-go, and I think because of pandemic time, it made the process different. We were emailing tracks back and forth, and so there was more iterations of rewriting and adding sections, and what if we took this section and put a different section here, and rearranging things. And so I think things got denser, but also there was more opportunity to kind of cut all the parts that felt like it would have been too tangential and not really supporting the tunes.
Okay.
So we'll see. The third album might just be one long Hawkwind jam, just like one chord.
Oh no.
I saw them live in the 70s. Amazing band. Especially the dancer there. Wow.
Oh, right.
That was very psychedelic, very weird. Just loved it. 1974 in Montreal. Yeah,
Mm.
Awesome.
yeah, Auckland. Yeah, let's talk about the 70s. If you guys seem to have different bands. I'm sure you've listened to all kinds of stuff because as musicians, we all like to hear some music, some good music, and there's been some great music in the past. So if I would ask you guys your influences, uh, starting with John as a keyboard player, what would what would have been your influence from the let's say the past and the present?
Oh, present might be harder than the past, actually.
Yeah, sure.
So I grew up mostly in the 80s, and my my dad was in a prog cover band in the 70s. Actually, he's a blues player, but somehow he got involved with these progressive rock people. So my sort of goal of the 80s was look up, like I had a couple of cassettes of his band playing, and I'm like, there had a couple of originals, but I was looking up they covered a Jethro Tull, a King Crimson, they didn't do any Genesis, unfortunately. And so I'm like tracking down all the original and Pink Floyd. So I'm tracking down all the original versions of these things because I only knew the ones my dad played. And so those definitely are influential on me. And others, actually, Alan Parsons Project and ELO, and of course Keith Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And yes, so all the sort of standard big ones that you would know. Anyway, so I think my dad's influence was his band's influence, maybe not his. But let's see. And then more anyway, so I feel like that's my core, but I feel like I play more. I think you nailed kind of my style, at least with this band. Because I mean, Dave is the guy with he's got all the notes that you can really consume. And when it's my solo time, I just love soaring solos that like have a very strong melody to them.
Yeah.
So I don't tend to play tons of notes during my solos. Although I feel like I'm probably due for one of those, maybe the next album.
Probably the next album, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to punt on the rest of the question, but I'll let someone else talk.
So what about you, Dave?
You know, at the beginning, Sabbath, Zeppelin, Floyd, just the obvious, you know, those are like ingrained, just heard it so much. But for me, there's a guitar player, an Irish guitar player named Gary Moore, who is one of my all-time favorites. And he played actually in Coliseum 2, which is a pretty cool prog band that a lot of people I don't know, maybe a lot of people do know about, but
There's not a lot of
with Don Airy.
Yeah.
Great
a lot
band.
Of fans from these from that time that I don't know. I had a few record stores for probably 30 years. So I know a lot of bands. So your Coliseum is fantastic. And Gary Moore, I'm not surprised at all.
And he's just so fiery.
Yeah.
Just so much passion in every note. I listen to tons of like extreme metal too, especially growing up. So lots of incredible musicians. You know, French Canadian technical death metal bands like Gorguts and what's the Cryptopsy was like, you know, there in the 90s there was some amazing music coming out of there. That was Odd Time Signatures and all kinds of stuff that was really influential as well. And in terms of modern bands, probably more of that stuff, more of the metal, just because there's so many interesting, weird things happening, subgenres within subgenres. There's this band called Behold the Arctopus, that's from New York, and it's all through composed. One guy plays a war guitar, which is kind of like a Chapman stick instrument, and then guitar and drums, and it's almost like modern classical music in the way it's written and composed, but the aesthetic feels like extreme metal. So it's a really intense listen. And that kind of stuff is really, really inspiring.
What about you, Michael?
Oh, let's see. Um,
Like
you know, I was,
your flute playing.
yeah, yeah. Oh, well, so I was thinking about when I was a kid, my dad had all of the Moody Blues records. He collected them year by year as they came out, and I think I would dig through his records, and I pulled out Days of Future Past, and I was just like, this looks really cool. Like, I'm gonna listen to this. And I remember everybody was gone, and it was like late at night, and I put on the headphones and I listened. I was like watching the moon rise or whatever as Nights in White Satin was playing. And um, I don't know if that's what gave me the flute bug. There was something about like when I finally ran across the old footage of like Peter Gabriel from the 70s, and he was like doing his thing, and then he's playing the flute, and he just like, to me, he looked so cool playing the flute. Like, I suddenly was like, that's the instrument for me. And I was like 21. I was like, I'm gonna play the flute. But so yeah, the Moody Blues. I'm really into Nick Drake, the singer-songwriter.
Great.
Gosh, yeah, like a lot of folk stuff, a lot of like world music, and what is it like? I grew up listening to the band REM a lot, and I would say that from the point of view as a lyricist, or how I try and abstractly paint pictures with lyrics, is probably from listening to all of their albums for years.
Yeah, such a great
So
American band, eh?
yeah, yeah.
Its influences. Who's the astral projectionist?
Who?
The astral projectionist?
Right. Did you say who is it?
Yeah.
I was
I'm
reading
just curious.
the
I saw that in your lyrics, and I was saying I'd love to have that question to Michael because I'm sure it comes from him.
Oh, sure. So you know the C.S. Lewis space trilogy?
Mm-mm.
It's like Out of the Silent Planet, Paralandria, and uh what is it? That Hideous Strength. So like sort of 1940s science fiction books. And he it was basically this guy got kidnapped into space, and then he met all these other kinds of beings, and he realized that he had a lot of, like, mankind had a lot of assumptions about what other beings would be like, or they would kind of picture that other beings would think and operate and have societies like humans, and he kept getting proven wrong. So that's just kind of what I
1940s, eh?
drew out of that. Yeah. It's all
C.S.
this, like,
C.S. Lewis. He was famous for what was it? The
Narnia,
yeah, Narnia stuff.
Chronicles of
That's it.
Narnia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So talk to me about your visit to Quebec. How did you like the Quebec City fans?
They were lovely. Just
You asked about the fans. The fans were amazing.
Yeah, you like the fans? Did
yeah.
you
Yeah,
did you
I'm
could you speak
encouraged to
to
learn how to speak French so I can talk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, especially Quebec more than Montreal, but Quebec City probably not a lot of people were talking English. I guess. Did you guys have to could meet a few of the people there?
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some people spoke a fair amount of English. Some people exchanged just very few words, but they were expressing a lot of good feeling, and you could really tell they were having a good experience, and it was so fun to just like, because we live really far away from there, like, it's quite a trek to be there. So I just felt like I kind of got like dropped into this whole other scene, this whole other world.
Yeah.
And
Sure, of the
great.
European and American culture, it's kind of weird, eh? So yeah, the people from Quebec just love music. They're huge fans. After they see one band, they'll get into their music big time. Lots of people that I talked to after your show, uh, they knew you guys. They heard probably one track or two tracks, but talked to a lot of them, and they were all excited. And they wanted to buy the two albums, even trying to know from what bands you guys were coming from, and they were all big time fans after the show. It was crazy. They discovered you guys. So
It was so cool. Like we sold some CDs before we even played, and then I heard people listening to it in the parking lot, like before our set, in their cars, and then afterward, really enthusiastic. Seemed like people are really paying attention, like you said, really interested in maybe the other bands that we played in, or just in being attentive to the whole performance, which is
absolutely
so cool.
not a lot of talking. We're all there listening to the music. Yeah, it was a big surprise for us. Your live shows are extremely engaging. You guys are fun to look at. Not only good musicians, but the whole band it was like a big turmoil, one after the other. It was fantastic. I'm a huge fan. Does it sound? Okay. Rosa, the Rosa, one of my favorites also from the last album, is a masterpiece for me. Can you tell me more about the process involved in the song? I was curious about that. Who wrote the song?
So I think I came up with the basic structure, melody of the song. I remember making a demo. I think it was an electric piano and maybe a tambourine, to say like, this is when the song speeds up, and this would be the snare drum or something. And I remember there was a lot of phases that we went through as we added each part, and how we thought it was going to sound and what tempo things were going to be at. And I think a couple of the original sections kind of got scrapped. I remember as we were arranging the Rasa that there was certain, it was kind of like certain ways that everyone was piecing the parts together. There's like one of my favorite parts was like when the song picks up tempo in the middle.
Yep.
And there's a vocal line, but then the guitar answers it, and then the vocal answers it, and it's like I sing something, and then you hear the ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-da, and it's like kind of interstitial. And that was the kind of things that made that song special to me, was just all the cool parts that everybody.
During your live shows, there's always a few songs that attract more attention, or people get really buzzed around by a certain song. What would you say are your top songs that really people are attracted when you play them live?
I was just thinking about Harasa because you were saying it right after Harasa. And that one, I feel like we have this lot of buildup. Michael's got his wings all spread big.
Yeah.
And then usually, but when we end that song, that's the song it's sort of the audience has to take a second and understand that, or process it or something. That's the one we don't get tons of applause right after we do it.
Oh, that's weird.
But to me, it's an amazing, I'm moved and I'm like, watching all this going on and trying to play.
I think
But
the applause happens during that song.
What did you say, Michael?
I said I've sometimes, like, to me the applause happens during that song as the different things unfold,
Yeah,
like rather than afterwards.
yeah, at the end.
I don't know.
That's that kind of song that you have to think about it, eh?
Yeah.
So apart from Rasa,
I think that to me it's always seemed like the isolation and foreboding.
yeah,
That one, I think it's got some really good climaxes, and then it ends with a recurring hook climax thing, and that I
is
felt
that
like
why
that
you
always
started
works
with
really well.
is that why you started the show in Quebec with Isolation? Was it a did you think of it as the first song that would be great starting with?
I think I thought that. I think a lot of the set lists from the tour, I would just say, like, hey guys, what do you think of this set? And then we'd make some amendments and end up with a set. I think we've only started with Isolation and Foreboding maybe 2 or 3 shows,
Oh, okay.
and we were gonna, like I suggested, we start with it last night at the concert, and our bass player Mike was like, he's like, I think it's weird. It's a weird starter song, and so then we switched it around.
What was
Yeah.
the first one then?
Mother River,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, which is also I think a great starter song, but like I like to switch it up, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. It's fun switching things over. What do you think, Dave?
Well,
what's
so
the
I have,
big
I have a question maybe for you. So sometimes some of our songs end with what we call like a rock and roll ending or a Star Search ending where everybody's, AC/DC ending is what I call it, where it keeps going. And some of our songs end uh, like Isolation and Foreboding. It's like, pop, pop, a tight ending. And do you think that an audience responds more to a tight ending or like a long rock and roll ending?
I think a long rock and roll.
Oh,
Mm.
good. We do lots of those.
I've noticed.
Sometimes even when we're not supposed to.
I think both are great, but as a starter, I was surprised with Isolation. It's a great song. As a
Mhm.
starter, I'm not sure. It's personal opinion.
Mhm.
Mother Nature, yeah, feel great about it. And the Thin Man, I just didn't know that song. Just another great song. Who composed it?
I think everybody. I don't
Everybody?
know.
Thin
I
Man was
composed
one
part of it,
yeah,
but I know
Michael
there's
started
big
it.
sections that I think Dave wrote, and I don't. John, you wrote a big section in the middle of that song.
not a Thin Man, Sunset.
Sunset. Oh, okay. I'm thinking about there's kind of like a keyboard solo
Oh,
in the middle of it that
yeah.
I love those chords,
Did
but
I
like,
write? I don't
but
know
you
if I wrote.
totally made it a whole new big part, you know.
I thought you wrote. Anyway, well, I played it. I probably wrote it. It's getting now pretty far from when some of the. That's like one of the very first songs, right?
Oh yeah.
Thin Man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's for the group. The first album also took a couple of years, so before we got it all together.
Why did you change producer on the second album?
The producer, Robert Cheek, who produced the new album, is a good friend of our drummer, Kelly, and they had worked together in the past as well. So he just wanted to work with him. And he was available. And so it wasn't that, we were intentionally not wanting it to sound like the first album or anything like that, but really just really wanted to work with Robert, and I think he did an amazing job.
Yeah. The
It was
sound
really,
is
really great.
the sound is tighter. I think the all the production is tighter than the first one. Uh, I don't know. There's a special something about the second album that we don't hear in the first one. I think you gotta, if you can stick with that guy, that would be awesome. He seems like to have a very good ear.
He does, and he really went out of his way to I think he looked at some classic albums that we all really liked and sort of analyzed what was happening in the really sub lows and the high highs, and tuning all of that stuff in. He even consulted with a couple other producers, and like really just taking the time and care to dial those elements in, because we wanted it to sound not retro in a way that would be like lo-fi and limiting, because sometimes you remember albums sounding a little different than when you actually pull them up, right?
Yep.
And but we also didn't want it to sound too modern. I don't know, modern and retro are hard terms, but we wanted to have a warmth that a lot of the things we remember have, but still have full fidelity.
Yeah.
Take advantage of the modern studio. So
And
I think he nailed that balance.
He did. He did. The way you describe it, that's the way I heard it the very first time. And I still hear it the same thing. There's a warmth to it. And it's also, the sound is all blended perfectly. All the vocals are amazing on the second album. I don't know if there was a lot of work into the vocals, because live shows and in the studios totally different, eh? And in terms of studio for the vocals, it was just amazing. What are you guys thinking about the vocals? Michael, let's start with you.
Oh, just like how they came out on the second record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of hours put into the vocals compared to the actual music.
Well, I think there was a lot of hours put into all of it, you
Yeah,
know.
for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely. I mean, I know I can picture, and I know what everybody kind of spent time on. It's been a big kind of kind of growth over a number of years. Like for me personally, an approach to how to capture your sound in a recording, and how to like feel happy with it.
Yeah.
So let's see. I think that for my part, I think I was recording the vocals after a lot of the tracks were done around, it was like December, January, like January of 2022. And there was a lot of snowstorms, and I would just like lock myself down in my basement studio with my microphone, and I would spend like an hour like warming up and kind of almost like getting ready for like a race, like, or getting on stage. And then some days I would cut several vocals, and then other days like it just wasn't working, and I just turned the tape off and just walked out, and I was like, not today. And so I felt like that process worked really well for me to get all the final takes that were on the record.
I guess most of the album was composed during those difficult times, and with the in the 20s, 21.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys,
Some of it went back to 2019 too.
20
I think we had
started.
I think we had maybe about 2 songs hashed out before the pandemic started.
Okay.
Something like that, yeah. But
What did it actually did to you guys, that pandemic, in terms of your musicianship? Did you guys practice more? Did you guys wanted to be together more often? What was your take on that?
Well,
it's just enough. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was hard to be together in person for a while. We eventually figured it out, and we did outdoor rehearsals for a while, really low volume in John's backyard, which was better than no rehearsals, but not at all the same as what we were normally used to.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of workarounds. And the one of the upshots, I think, is that because we were working remotely so much, we were able to really hone in. When you're writing in person, you're maybe responding and there's a really cool energy happening, and that's fantastic. When you're writing at home, you're under the microscope because you're recording as you're writing and demoing. So I think that it changed the process. And I know for me, over the pandemic, I got to practice, just practice a lot in ways that I hadn't, because there was no gigs and things like that. So it was a nice opportunity to really woodshed. I learned a lot of covers and worked on techniques and was able to spend a lot of time doing that kind of stuff. So I actually played tons of guitar, just mostly at home.
And I guess that you guys really missed the live shows during that time. It's difficult for a band not to be playing live, I guess, eh?
Mm-hmm.
That was one thing we wanted to keep, or I guess it's not as much concern for the other band members, but for me, you can layer on a million keyboard or whatever parts, but I was trying to keep it where I could probably play it live. And a lot of that time I got to play with a bunch of new software synthesizers, and there's a lot more synthesizers on this album, or different varieties of them than there were on the first album, but I tried to make them all sound like they were in the same palette.
Yeah.
And then I need to make sure that I can sculpt around what might already be going on that's important, or if I am the important part, I can sort of choose. And that's a lot of discussion like that happened with the band.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we might have over optimized. I'm not sure. So we have this melody, like that's the important thing. And then any available spot for information, we kind of filled in, but we're like, so it's pretty dense. So upon your 10th listen, you might even notice something else that you missed. So we had lots of time to fill in all the gaps, but hopefully we didn't like crystallize it to where it's not listenable. Sounds like we didn't.
Like on the Illusion, your Mellotron playing is beautiful, man. It's I don't know where you come from. These parts are just blend perfectly. There's all kinds of keyboards, but the Mellotron seems to be like in a magical way blending all the keyboard parts. What did you think about the song and the way you use the Mellotron on that song?
I think you're saying Isolation. Is that what song you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So some of that was from the original demo that Mike did. That's largely Mike's song.
Oh, yeah.
He had that Mellotron, like that break at the end, which I think is awesome. He was using, he had sort of a poor man's Mellotron, so I had to get that sounding good.
It's still expensive.
Like everybody, eh? It's a bit expensive getting a real Mellotron. Eh?
Yeah, I have like 4 different software ones, and I actually don't use the same Mellotron on every song. They all have a slight different flavor. They're modeling slightly different way or record or sampled.
Okay.
But yeah, so I really can't speak to the writing of that particular. I do sneak it in other sections of that song that wasn't in the original, but that's like a Mike Murphy chord structure and Mellotron, and it was a delight to add the solo over the top of that, and it's just those chord changes I just really love. I like that song a lot.
What about you, Michael? For the process during those times?
Oh, the process, man. Those were interesting times because I was living about 4 hours away from the rest of the band.
Oh.
So before the pandemic started, maybe about a year before it began, my wife and we moved about 4 hours away so she could go to school. And so there was a lot of like commuting back to Seattle to hang out with everybody. And so I was like, I think I'd sleep in John's guest room pretty often. and we'd try and do back-to-back band practices, and then the pandemic started on top of that, and then it was like, oh man, I don't know. It was a real surreal and weird soul searching kind of time. And I feel like I remember a lot of instances where when I would get an email from one of the other guys in the band and they were like, here's a new song idea, or I wrote I wrote a new section to this song that we worked on 3 weeks ago. It was just like, I don't know, it was like the guy on the desert island getting the little like bottle with the message coming out, and you're just like, oh, I'm not alone in this world. Oh, this is great. It was like, so the band was a really bright light during all of those times for me. So I just feel like the record kind of reflects that when I listen back to it.
So for the third album, is there any how can I say that? There's always people are always expecting something else from a band. They want that step up. Is that something that gets you a bit nervous, knowing that you did such a great album for the second album? Is there a step up going for the third album? Are you guys nervous about that? Don't you think about it, or not at all?
Not until this very moment. Now we're nervous. Thanks a lot.
Oh, sorry, guys.
I know that like sometimes when we do a show, I feel like people expect a really exciting concert experience. And so I think about it a lot, and sometimes I worry about it. I'm like, I want it to be really cool. And then when you get in the moment, it's almost like just being in the moment is what's cool. And so you just gotta let it go. Um, yeah, I mean, I think as far as like doing a next thing, I think as long as like whatever it is that we're into right now or might be into in 6 months from now, I think it's good to follow those muses. And I felt like from the first album into the second album, we made a kind of leap in terms of how we could organize all of our thoughts and how to complement each other the best. I thought we made a big step up. So I feel like we've made that progress. And I think if we kind of continued along that track of just kind of organization and trying to just really listening to each other and what, kind of what the idea is that we're going for, I think we could put another quality album out. I don't know beyond that.
Sure, I'm quite sure. You guys sounded great on the album, and live it was even better. So I think you guys, I don't know if the friendship is amazing between you guys, but during your live shows, you guys are amazing. You seem like a blended, perfect group. Hopefully, the third album is going to be amazing. It's been actually very fun talking to you guys. Like I said, English is not my first language, but I understood mostly what you guys were saying, and our viewers are going to have a good time listening to it. Hopefully, you come back, and this time come to Montreal also.
Mm-hmm.
We'll make sure that we've got a venue for you guys. John, you were about to say something?
No, I was just giving you a thumbs up. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You want to come back?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure it's going to happen because people have talked about you guys since you guys left. So there's a big buzz around you guys. I don't know if it's around in the States. You guys are well known or not? Apart from Seattle. No?
There's people that distribute our record, and so sometimes you see that some of them sold, and
Yeah.
we met some people or talked to them on Facebook. It's really hard to gauge. Like we did a couple of short tours just to see like who's gonna come out and see us, and you know, sometimes some people did. And definitely, I think we all feel that doing things like playing a festival where we get to play with other bands that they've been around a long time is a really good introduction.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, hopefully we're gonna see you soon, guys. If not, I'll be in Seattle seeing you guys if you don't come back.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for everything, and you guys have been amazing.
Thank you
Nice
so
meeting you.
much. Great speaking with you.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you.
See you
Thanks
soon.
for-
Bye bye.
Bye.